We are in Psalm 144, I believe. 144. Let's see what our friend...
Put pair of glasses too. I found in a room in there if anybody needs. I can't see.
Oh.
I think they're just 1.50.
Those glasses there in case somebody needs some little magnification. There. Okay. And Psalm 144 is David's praise to God because of who he is. And his prayer is for the same reason. So, it is another Psalm of David. And it's believed to have been written near the time David came to be recognized as the king over all the tribes of Israel. And the psalm expresses David's heart for the nation in both war and peace. And again, history a little bit on that is that after Saul died, Saul and Jonathan died, David should have been like king, but there was still some who wanted or didn't recognize him as king. So for a while they had made one of Saul's other sons kings. And I'd heard, and I didn't double check it, I should have, that there was two tribes, Judah and Benjamin, that were following David. But that didn't seem right because Benjamin would have been Saul's tribe, and I would have think they would have been with Saul's descendant along with all the rest of the nation. But at least Judah was. My recollection was that Judah was with David and everybody else was with Saul's other son. And anyhow, after 7 or so years, I think it was, that all got worked out and David became king over the reunified kingdom of Israel again. All the tribes recognized him as king, as they should have. So, let's look at the first 2 verses here. It's a prayer and worshiping regarding seasons of war.
Blessed be the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for war and my fingers for battle, my loving kindness and my fortress, my high tower and my deliverer, my shield, and the one in whom I take refuge, who subdues my people under me.
Thank you. Interesting. Mine has just subdues peoples under me, but I guess Dead Sea Scrolls, many Hebrew manuscripts, Jerome, of all people, Syriac Aquila, and a lot of Hebrew manuscripts have subdues my people, which, if it's, whenever all the people came under David, that would make a lot of sense in there. But David starts out here, blessed be the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for war. And, of course, we know that David was, from a young age, a very capable warrior. We know of the whole deal with Goliath, of course, but before that even, after David was anointed, and Saul had these, bad spirits coming on him, this bouts of depression or whatever, and he wanted somebody to go and soothe him with music or whatever, and the guy said, oh, I know this guy, David, he's Jesse's son, and he's this and he's that, and he gave all these great qualifications. One of them was he was a man of war, I believe is what he said. Did an awful lot of guessing so early on in the thing. Let's see, 1 Samuel 15 it would have to be. Towards the end, I guess. Maybe it's 16. Nope, end of 16. It was after David had been anointed king, but before he had done anything with Goliath. And starting in verse 14, it says that the Spirit of the Lord had departed from Saul, and a harmful spirit from the Lord tormented him. And so he wanted somebody to come and help him out with that. And he goes, seek out a man who is skillful in playing the lyre. And then when the Spirit was on him, this guy would come and play the lyre, and he'd be okay. And a guy said, behold, I have seen a son of Jesse the Bethlehemite, he was from Bethlehem, who was skillful in playing, a man of valor, a man of war, prudent in speech, and a man of good presence. And the Lord is with him. And so anyhow, he came, and David started playing the lyre for Saul part-time and tending the sheep part-time.
Yeah, I think it would be the sheep part when he's a shepherd that he'd play more music than when he was soldier.
Yeah, well, he wasn't a soldier at this point, although I think Dave said that Saul kind of made him, like everybody was like pleased with him, and Saul, I think, made him his armor bearer at that
You
time.
said valor, you said something about battle or valor or
Yeah, a man of war.
man of war. You wouldn't think that he would be that yet.
You wouldn't think. I don't know. I don't know if, I don't think the guy was gilding the lily, as it were. Trying to
It
hype
just
David
says
up.
he trains me for war.
Yeah.
And so to me, he isn't a war king yet, and he's training him to be that.
Yeah, well, I think he's basically his prowess, he's describing as to God,
Right.
I think, is part of that.
He said on 21, he became his armor bearer.
Yeah.
That's not good.
So he wasn't like going out and fighting, he was just kind of bearing the armor. He would like help him get in and out of the armor and carry his shield, maybe a sword. Kind of like a squire is what we would think. But it's just interesting that even before David had distinguished himself as a warrior, the word was that he was a mighty warrior.
So
And
the fighting off the animals, maybe?
I don't know.
This was after he killed.
No, before.
This before.
Seemingly, yeah. You never can be 100% sure how, like the way things go, because sometimes they'll group things by, like topics, and so maybe like this whole thing about King Saul and how David got anointed was one thing, and then there's this whole other deal about now this deal with Goliath might have been a different thing. But if you read the account in chapter 17, you'll see that after David killed Goliath, then Saul was like, "You ain't leaving my side." And then Jonathan and him became like best friends. Jonathan's like putting his cloak on him and giving him his
Because they
sword
didn't
and
know
stuff.
who he was, really.
Yeah, it's almost like he wasn't, it's almost like, wait a minute, who's this again?
Yeah.
Because I think he would have known that, oh, this is David. But, yeah. So, anywho.
Wasn't David playing music for Saul before he killed?
Goliath?
Yeah.
Yeah, that seems to be the way it reads. Like in 16, David's anointed, and at the end of 16, like God is already like putting him in a position to start learning and start knowing stuff. But he gets this report about how great he is even beforehand. And so Jesse sends him, but it's clear in 17 that David didn't spend his whole time in the palace with Saul, that sometimes he would come home and tend the sheep. And maybe it is when Saul was out to war, maybe then he let him go back home.
Because he was home before to go check on his brothers at Goliath's time. So he was at home tending sheep. Too.
So he was like kind of doing both, it would appear.
Right.
And then, again, after he killed him, then basically, as soon as David returned from striking down to the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Saul with the head of the Philistine in his hand. And Saul said, "Well, who are you, young man?" And he said that he was Jesse, son of your servant Jesse the Bethlehemite. And then he said, as soon as he had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. And Saul took him that day and would not let him return into his father's house. So it was like a thing changed, like Saul saw something in David, and then immediately he got jealous of David, and then he saw that God was with him, and it made him more afraid of David, but not so much that he stopped trying to kill him. Anyhow, training is an essential part of success as a soldier, and David understood that it was the Lord who had trained his hands for war and his fingers for battle. And again, David's such an amazing character to read about. But question number 1, fill in the blank. David begins by blessing the Lord, who is his what?
Rock.
His rock. In his youth, David's hand and figures were familiar with the shepherd's hook and the harp, and not the sword and the spear, and apparently also with the sling, though. But God hath adapted and enabled them to feats of arms and warlike exploits. And then a bunch of stuff there. But if a man or woman feels that God is training him or her to use spiritual weapons, such as the sword of the Spirit, the Word of God, then training must always continue. It is never who trained trained my hands for war, but always in the present, who trains my hands for war. And so the idea is that it's something that would never stop. And we know that about the Bible. We should never stop reading the Bible. It's not like a regular book that you'd read and you put it up on your shelf and it's like, oh, I conquered that book. It's one you got to keep going to over and over and over again. And God can keep finding new things to show you within His Word. And as I said, my dad's mentor and former pastor here, Truman Barrows, Dad always said that he was anxious to share with Dad some new thing he found in the Bible every day. And he was old when he retired from here, and he no doubt knew the Bible forwards and back, but he always found some new thing, some new gem or something like that. Is that another fly?
I'm thinking it is.
Another fly.
That was his brother.
You think they're going, yeah, he's back for revenge. But speaking earlier, there you go. There's some guts. All right. Now,
In the family, isn't
And
it?
it is.
Don't make those guys mad.
It's a talent in that Lord family.
well, the Lord has trained their hands for war against these blind.
There you go.
That's very obvious.
I took a little more training than Mom, I guess.
Well, she's been at it for a little bit longer. Now, Jerome, who was a guy back in the day, he said the scriptures are shallow enough for a babe to come and drink without fear of drowning, and deep enough for a theologian to swim in without ever touching the bottom. And that's why you don't train and then you're done. You just always keep training with the Word of God. And question 2, fill in the blank 2. The psalmist declares the Lord trains his what? His hands for battle. That's right. And in a spiritual sense, we know that following Jesus just basically is kind of enlisting in the army. There's going to be battles, there's going to be struggles, there's going to be things that you're going to have to come up against. And that's why we're, told to put on the full armor of God and to train. And Paul was big about his always training about like an athlete, but still, studying to show yourself approved in that. Because, Jesus said, not that following me and everything's going to be hunky-dory. It's like follow me and there's going to be problems. There's going to be all kinds of problems. Matter of fact, they're going to kill you. And in John, towards the end, 14 or 15, I think, he's telling them, and it's like, these things are going to happen. It's like they're going to throw you out of the synagogue, and they're going to kill you, and they're going to do this, and they're going to do that. And he goes, but don't worry, because I've overcome the world. But he continues here.
Lord, what is man? That
Oh,
you take-
sorry.
I'm sorry.
Not ready to write that yet, but
Oh, go ahead.
sorry. I was gonna-
Sorry.
Sorry, I wasn't clear. He is my steadfast love and my fortress, my stronghold and my deliverer, my shield in whom I take refuge. And it's saying all these things that God is and in the context of war, then fortress, stronghold, deliverer, shield, refuge, those all kind of make thematic sense in that, but he starts out with my steadfast love. His loving kindness is what David is putting first and foremost. And this is the word that we see over and over again, hesed, which talks about God's loyal and sometimes referred to like covenant love. The fact that God is going to love us not based on what we do, but based on who He is. And it's this loving kindness that never runs out. It never is expended. There's always God's love, mercy, and faithfulness for here. And it's important to point out, too, that David didn't say he's a fortress, a stronghold, a deliverer. He's mine. David knew on a personal level that God was these things for him, and that's what he's praising God for being. And again, who subdues my people under me. And David likely wrote this after was received as king over all the tribes of Israel. And again, there wasn't really a fight like David's going to go and conquer the rest of Israel to bring them under the control that God had ordained. Just like whenever he was anointed to be king, he let God work it out in God's time and in God's way. And ended up there was a lot of monkey business went on the Israel side with what's his name? Not Joab. Who did I just say? The guy who brought David in. No, it wasn't Jerome.
I'm sorry.
That wasn't familiar to me.
Well, his death caused
It was a different name.
a lot of trouble.
Not Rehoboam.
Abner.
I don't know.
Abner killed Joab's brother, and Joab ended up killing Abner, and it was a whole thing. And Abner had slept with one of Saul's concubines or something like that. Like he was kind of making his own play for the throne. And then when Saul's son got mad, then he said, well, fine, I'm just going to go to David then. So, yeah, bunch of stuff going on there. But anyhow, but David just kind of was letting God work it out in God's time, relying on God to make God's promises happen, which is a good lesson for us, not to try to get in and muddy things up and make things worse than they already are for us by getting in, God's way, so to speak. But David praised God as his rock who trains his hands for war. Reflecting on your life, how have you seen God equip or prepare you for challenging seasons? Not necessarily physical battles, of course, but spiritual or personal struggles. You guys ever had a situation where you went through something, and then at the time you it's what's that all about? But then maybe years and years later you might realize, oh, God was kind of preparing me for a thing that was going to come up, or he was getting me into a place where when the thing came up, it wouldn't be like a devastating, world-shattering ending type thing for you.
Jackie got saved on his deathbed.
Oh, that's great.
If it wasn't for me, it wouldn't. Well, he just thought he used me as the tool, even though years and years didn't make any sense. I mean, he wasn't paying attention to me, but
Yeah, well,
people don't believe he did, but it was real because he cried.
yeah.
He
Well,
felt it.
Paul had said that about how that a godly woman can win her husband to God.
36 years almost.
It takes a while. I'd read a thing about some guy, I can't think who he was or what he was, but he had he grew up with 3 friends, him and his 3 friends, and after he became Christian, he prayed for them every day, and after 5 years, one became a Christian, and after 20 years, the second one became a Christian, after 40 years, the last one, finally became a Christian, but he just constantly, again, we don't know God's timing.
He might say, "You're going to heaven before me."
At least you know where he went.
Well,
Yes.
Yep.
it's a good thing. It's a type of thing that you just got to be faithful and do what God says. And much like David, maybe he could have tried to force the other people to join the kingdom. That we can't force people to join God's kingdom. We can't force them to be saved. We just have to be faithful and patient, loving and kind, and pray. Well, as Hattie Mae once said, sometimes you got to go upside the head. It's the only way. But anywho, let's look at the next verses now, verses 3 and 4. If you wouldn't mind, Carol.
Lord, what is man that you take knowledge of him, or the Son of Man that you are mindful of him? Man is like a breath. His days are like passing shadows.
Thank you. Here we see the unexpected love and care of God for humanity and for individual people too. That's the amazing thing too. It's not just like people as a whole. It's like individual people that God cares about. And we see, again, the parallelism that we've seen all through the Psalms and in the Bible in general, that David basically has two things here he's thinking of. It's like, why does God even care about people? And then also, it's like, men are very brief on the earth. But he says it in two poetic ways. Lord, what is man that you take knowledge of him? And then, or the Son of Man that you are mindful of him. Both of them are God caring about people, about man. And then the second one here, man is like a breath. His days are like a passing shadow. Well, both. A passing shadow is very temporary. Breath is just gone and it's dissipated. And so he's saying the same thing two different ways to emphasize it, to make the point that, you know, it amazed David, and it should amaze us, that God has an interest in us and in people in general. You know, there are those that would say that God, you know, created man, he created everything, and then he just like let it go. You know, he's off doing whatever else. And you know, that's not the case. God has, you know, constantly been helping and watching out and guiding and trying to direct and trying to help man, and it's man that keeps like rejecting God and moving away from him. I mean, even back to the garden, right? Apparently every day in the cool of the evening, God would come down and talk with Adam and Eve, walk with them and talk with them and stuff like that. And then, you know, they sin, and then God comes and can't find them. God then says, well, fine, forget you guys. If you want to hide from me, that's fine. Instead, God, you know, called them out. He you know, it's like, hey, where you guys at? What's going on? And he put into motion, you know, he sacrificed an animal to cover them up. He said he was going to send the Savior eventually through the line, the seed of the woman. And, you know, the curse and stuff was there because of the sin they had done. But God immediately enacted the plan, or that he already had, but he, you know, revealed the plan to reverse all that, to get salvation, to make good the curse that they had brought on themselves and on all the earth. Yeah. This is from Pooh. Although I am king over my people, yet alas, I am but a man, a base, sinful, mortal, and miserable creature. If compared with thee, less than nothing and vanity, said Poole, speaking there for David. As I've heard Alistair Begg say quite often, he goes, even the best of men are at best men. We're all base, sinful, mortal, miserable creatures. And we all are just, you know, here today, gone tomorrow. But God, who is from everlasting to everlasting, still cares about us. Although it's interesting, we're not actually here today, gone tomorrow. Once we're here for eternity. We're just not necessarily on this earth for eternity. We're going to be somewhere for eternity. It's kind of an interesting thing I've been thinking about as of late. And I could really make everybody think I'm an idiot if I start talking about Excel files and how you can lock certain things and drag it and it just keeps going on. So I'm not going to say that because that'd be stupid. So, question number 3. David asks, Lord, what is man? What is man that you take knowledge of him? Man is a breath, all right? Just barely here. The psalmist, and this is number 4, the psalmist compares man's days to a shadow that passes away outside of anyhow. The document contrasts David's view of God as a mighty warrior with his amazement at God's care for frail humans. How does this contrast deepen your appreciation for God's nature? Or how does it encourage you to trust him in times of weakness? Anyone? I think it should be encouraging to us to know that God knows we're weak. God knows how we fail. He knows that, you know, we're going to mess up more often than not. And, you know, and he knows all that, and yet he still loves us. He still cares about us. He still is mindful of us. And he still wants to have a relationship with us through Jesus. and he, makes that happen through Jesus' blood. And so it's I think, an encouraging thing to know that even when we mess up, we might, even surprise ourselves with how stupid we are most of the time, but we're not surprising God. In one way, he knows we're that stupid already, but in other ways, he knows that we're going to mess up. He knows we're going to sin, and yet he still cares about us.
Actually, he knows it before we do.
Yeah, I mean, in a real sense, he does. He knows everything that we're going to do, and that's why that Jesus' sacrifice was once and for all. It wasn't for the sins so far, and then, 2,000 years later, Jesus had to come back. Oh, I'm going to die again because we got all these other sins that are piled up. It's not like doing the dishes, where you just keep piling up, and you got to wash them again, and pile up, wash them again. God saves us once for all, one time for all time, and we just have to trust in him for that. So let's look now at the next few verses, verses 5 through 8.
Bow down your heavens, O Lord, and come down. Touch the mountains, and they shall smoke. Flash forth lightning, and scatter them. Shoot out your arrows, and destroy them. Stretch out your hand from above. Rescue me, and deliver me out of the great waters, from the hands of the foreigners, whose mouths speak lying words, and whose right hand is a right hand of falsehood.
Thank you. David starts out here using this phrase and images from God's appearance on Mount Sinai. If you recall, whenever, the mountain smoke, there was thunder, everything was shaken, it was quite a scene. And then asking God to, shoot forth his arrows and destroy them, stretch out your hand, rescue me, deliver me out of the great waters, from the hand of the foreigners. But getting ahead of myself there. David used phrases and images again from Mount Sinai to give a sense of awe and even terror connected with God's presence. He wanted, I think, his enemies to see that God was with them, because that was the main thing. It wasn't how a mighty warrior David was. It wasn't how great a country Israel was, even united. It was that God was with them, that God was on their side and fighting for their behalf. So he's asking God to make his presence known to all of these enemies that are around about. And I guess something to think about is that, the Philistines probably thought they had kind of won. They'd killed Saul, they'd killed his son, they'd won all this. The kingdom was kind of in disarray and everything. And so there was enemies around to be taken care of that they needed to do something about. They needed God to help with. So, number 5. Fill in the blank 5. David prays for the Lord to bow down his what? Heavens and come down. And number 6. The psalmist asks God to send out his what? His lightning and rescue him. Okay. I'm looking in the wrong book entirely. I'm wondering why I can't find my place. Good gravy. Rescue me, deliver me out of great waters. David asked that the same God of majestic awe would fight for him, sending forth lightning and arrows against the foreigners who fought against David with lies and falsehood. And of course, great waters, often waters are like troubles, and they're going to overcome you and drown you, essentially. Number 7. If you would mind, that's
Hold that thought.
Yes. That's perfect. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
See, Spurgeon here says, those against whom he pleaded were out of covenant with God. They were the Philistines and Edomites, or else they were men of his own nation of black heart and treacherous spirit, who were real strangers, though they bore the name of Israel. And of course we know that David had people that were against him. I think Shimei is the guy's name. Whenever David fled Jerusalem in Absalom's rebellion, who was throwing rocks at him and cursing him, and David's men, it's like, oh, let's go get that guy. But David said, I probably deserve it, and he just went on his way. Although Solomon did kill Shimei later on. So don't throw rocks at... What's that?
But David didn't.
David didn't. David told him, though.
Yeah,
It's like,
he told him to, but he didn't do it.
of course, it was Shimei's own stupidity that caused that. He wasn't supposed to leave the city, and he went ahead and did. And when he came back, it's like, guess what? It's like having one of those ankle bracelet low jack things, I guess. But neither here nor there, because question 7, fill in the blank. David seeks deliverance from the great, or from the what? Great. From the great waters of foreign enemies.
What does it mean, the right hand of falsehood, in number 8?
I think what it's saying is the right hand is either, it's two different things. One, it's a sign of power. It's like the strength is the right hand. That's my left. Is the right hand. And it's also, though, like means integrity. And just like, we like shake hands. It's kind of to show we don't have a weapon in our hand.
But falsehood, what's that?
Well, I think it's saying that, first of all, they have no integrity, and that the only thing they have is falsehoods. They only have lies and deceit, and that to go after David. They're not fighting with honest. They don't have an actual quarrel against David, other than the fact that, if they're the Philistines or the Edomites, they just hate him and want whatever. Or if it's these other people within the nation who, think that somebody of Saul's lineage should be the king, or think maybe they should be the king. Why not? They're good and everything. It could be like that. People who are jealous and lie and want to try to overthrow David's rule. And in some way, even you could see that in Absalom, right? I mean, that's his whole strategy, was to turn the people against David by lying, by saying, if I was the king, boy, I'd take care of these problems, but you can't go see David. He's too busy. Wish I could do something for you. Maybe if you made me king one day. That was like his whole campaign, was lies to try to get the people on his side, and he succeeded to some effect on that, but of course not ultimately. David asked for deliverance from foreigners who speak lies and falsehood. In your life, what lies from other society or even self-doubt have you faced? And have you sought God's truth to overcome them? One, I think that, speaking of like self-doubt type things we tell ourselves, is that like we are either too far gone to go to God for salvation. We've done too much bad stuff. We're too wicked, we're too evil or whatever. Or that we need to clean ourselves up before we can go to God. There's all these types of things that we tell ourselves, which are just lies that are told to try to keep us from coming to God. It's not something that we find in the Bible, and it's not something that God ever says. It's just something that we tell ourselves, that lies that that Satan tells us to make us not go to God. Let's look at the next 2 verses here, 9 and 10.
I will sing a new song unto thee, O God, upon psalmists and instruments of 10 strings will I sing praises unto thee. It is he that giveth salvation unto the kings, who delivereth David his servant from the hurtful sword.
Thank you. I will sing a new song to you, O God. New victories and new deliverance required a new song. David's love and help for David were always fresh and new, so his praise would always also be. This is praise and for deliverance and that, but the same way it's kind of almost like even David's prayers that we see in the Psalms when he was in trouble. It wasn't always just like, oh, by the way, see Psalm 35. Just go back to that one. But it was a new cry out to God, a new asking God to help him. It wasn't just saying, well, here I am again with the same problem. Please do something. But in the same way, whenever David did have deliverance in that, he needed to come up with a new song. It was a way of praising God, was singing a song. Even with David, not only singing a song, but creating a song and playing it on the harp of 10 strings. I don't know why a 10-string harp was important, but does anybody have anything else there? Does anybody have any, like a certain word or something they use for that? Because I don't. Sometimes the translators will help you out by telling you what something is, but it might kind of disguise or give a different focus on a thing than you might necessarily need. But in question 8, David vows to sing a what? A new song to the Lord, the one who brings salvation to kings. David had felt God's help many times as a humble shepherd boy and as a despised fugitive, also as a mighty warrior. We sense that David was almost surprised that God would help him as a king. I don't get that. Strike that from the record. I don't think David was surprised. I think David expected that and knew that that's what he needed. He needed God's help in all situations, whether he was tending sheep or running from the king or fighting a battle or ruling a people. He knew that God could rescue him from the deadly sword. Let's look now at 11 through 15. This is the last big chunk. It's a big chunk, though. Sorry.
I don't have. I just closed my phone. Do you want to read it?
You closed your phone. You got a Bible?
I do, but I can't see. I don't wear my glasses.
Good night.
There's some down here.
I know. I have prescriptions.
Then our sons in their youth will be like well-nurtured plants, and our daughters will be like pillars, carved to adorn a palace. Our barns will be filled with every kind of provision. Our sheep will increase by thousands, by tens of thousands in our fields. Our oxen will draw heavy loads. There will be no breaching of walls, no going into captivity, no cry of distress in our streets. Blessed is the people of whom this is true. Blessed is the people whose God is the Lord.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. See, I can read.
I just closed my phone. I never heard that.
Don't make fun of me. I forgot my glasses at home. I can't not see my Bible.
This was lovely. I looked at something. I'm like,
I know you can expand it.
Dad.
I know it's the best thing ever.
You're too young to have that problem, sweetie.
Oh, well, thank you.
Okay. Number 9, fill in the blank. David asked God to deliver him from those whose right hand is the right hand of what? Falsehood. Right. And he says that our sons may be as plants grown up in their youth. David prayed for a series of blessings that would come along among God's people when God dealt with the evil speakers in their midst. The list of blessing focuses on the concerns of everyday people in farming societies. And I think also it could be looked at as a fulfillment of what God had promised through Moses when they were coming into the promised land. All these blessings that they would receive if they would follow God and do what God said, as opposed to the curses they would receive if they did not do that. And in particular, all these great physical blessings, and that there would be, no cry of distress in the street. I thought there was a whole thing there about taken into captivity. No suffering or mishap, failure in the future. But all these things were things that would be blessings based on them keeping God's word. Fill in the blank 10. The psalmist prays that his sons may be like what? Plants grown up in their youth. Happy are the people who are in such state. David prayed as a wise and caring king, asking God for blessing upon his people in their common everyday lives. And again, thinking about this as the prayer of a newly crowned king, at least over this whole area here, David's prayer isn't for, great military victories and expanded lands and to see his enemies, groveling at his feet and hear the lamentations of their women and that sort of stuff. But it's for just basically the people to prosper and to be basically blessed by God. A king can go out maybe and try to win wars and try to gain territory by conquest or by treaty or whatever, but the king can't make sheep bring forth more sheep and be really what's the good word?
Prolific.
Yes, prolific. Perfect word. He can't make all these great things happen. Only God can. Providing all kinds of produce. The granary's full. All this stuff. All that stuff is something God can do, and that God will bless the people who follow Him and do what He would have them to do.